the jury find the defendant, Taylor Schabusiness, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information.
In less than 1 hour of deliberations, jurors find Taylor Schabusiness guilty of murdering, dismembering, and sexually assaulting her lover. But the case isn't over yet.
The defendant has been found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault. We will now proceed with the second phase of this trial.
With day 4 of Wisconsin versus Taylor Schabusiness comes the second half of the case, where jurors must now decide whether she's responsible for the crime she's convicted of based on her plea. With new testimony from defense witnesses comes a closer look into the mind of the convicted killer and her life leading up to the crime.
Love you. I love you too. Go Paris.
That's a psychotic person right there.
Just a fucking loser, and he got my daughter involved in it.
My opinion is that she qualifies for the not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect.
Prosecutors say 25-year-old Taylor Schabusiness killed her ex-boyfriend, 24-year-old Shad Thyrion, in February 2022. In the first phase of the trial, jurors heard from first responders to the Green Bay, Wisconsin crime scene, who described recovering Thyrion's decapitated head in a bucket along with his penis. Throughout the rest of the basement, investigators found his dismembered body in bags and totes.
Just to verify we had an actual head in a bucket, lifted the towel off, and there was, in fact, a human severed head in the bucket.
Upon arresting Schabusiness on the other side of the city, investigators found more of Thyrion's body in a crock-pot box. Schabusiness later admitted to killing Thyrion by using a metal dog collar to choke him to death. Later on, she described using kitchen knives to dismember his body and, quote, play with and sexually assault him.
The chain goes around his neck and you start choking him. And you just realize that he was going to die or what?
I'm just like, I think I went a little too far because I was blacking out while I was doing it, right? And then like, fuck. And then like, I look at him, I'm like, shit, he's already purple. I'm like, fuck. I'm like, I don't know if he's fucking, is he good? Is he good? But then like when I woke up, like, you know, during the blackout moment, I'm like, shit. Like he was coughing up blood. I'm like, I don't know, I just kept on going. Like, sad.
You made the comment, you said that when you were choking him, he was coughing up blood, you kind of were like, I'm going this far, I'm just going to keep going. Did you realize that by continuing that may kill him?
Like, yeah, because I felt bad because I'm like, damn, he's going to be losing after this. I'm like, might as well just kill it.
Jurors were shown Schabusiness's police interviews on day 3 before hearing closing arguments from both sides.
Right, this isn't an accident. If it's an accident, you're not going forward. You're not seeing this result and keep pulling. You're calling for help. You're stopping. You're certainly not after the fact, after you finally finish, then cutting up his body, right? You have all the evidence in this case points to intent, right? You have her acts after the fact, like I said. You know, if this was an accident, something happens, right? You call for help, and you have the exact opposite. You have the defendant cutting him up and cleaning up, getting rid of the remains, pouring it down the shower. We heard a lot of testimony about that. Kind of wiping up with the Clorox wipes, which the defendant is acknowledging as well. So you have the defendant's statement in the case, and it lines up with everything else in the case, right? Even little facts that she's remembering and telling you about, right?
Brown County Assistant District Attorney Caleb Saunders presented the defense's closing argument, saying Schabusiness knowingly killed Thyrion.
Why is somebody going to this length, not only cutting up a body? We heard from Dr. Tranquita about the multiple sort of start and stop kind of signs, the total evisceration of Shad, bagging him into other bags and attempting to carry out. Like, that's the intent, right? We use our common sense that's why you're doing that.
Schabusiness's defense attorney, Christopher Freilich, argued many questions in the case have been left unanswered.
I'd like to share with you that I believe this case is a puzzling, unclear, confusing, and bizarre set of facts. It is unknown what really happened between February 22nd of 2022 and February 23rd of 2022. What we do know in this case is that numerous law enforcement officers testified. We had detectives, we had police officers, we had Dr. Tranquita, and DNA experts, forensic specialists, lots of different people, some citizen witnesses. I'd ask that you consider setting aside your emotions and decide this case based on the facts that are presented. But what I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that there really are no eyewitnesses as to what really happened down in the basement. There is no Taylor Schabusiness there, no other people there, and so that'll be something that you'll have to consider and think.
Freilich also pointed to Schabusiness's strange behavior during the police interviews.
She did say during the interview, "I can't think right now. I'm effing nuts." She said that she was up all night, that the body would rebuild itself. She said weird, odd things. Consider her credibility. Consider what she says. Consider what she said to Detective Groff or Detective Scanlon. She said stuff, I would submit, that she said things that didn't make sense.
Brown County District Attorney Dave Lassay gave the state's rebuttal argument.
We know exactly what Taylor intended to happen for all three of these offenses. She engaged in intentional conduct in each of these acts. You are asked to look at each of the 6 elements, and there are only the 6 elements that Attorney Saunders described to you. That as to count 1, she did cause Shad's death. There is no doubt she had the mental purpose to do that. And that she knew that her conduct was practically certain to cause it. She described to you how she visualized him struggling, blood coming out of his mouth, but she did not stop.
With that, jurors were sent to deliberate.
The case has been argued by counsel. The court has instructed you regarding the rules of law which should govern you in your deliberations. The time has now come when the great burden of reaching a just, fair, and conscientious decision of this case is to be thrown wholly upon you, the jurors, selected for this important duty.
After only 45 minutes, jurors returned 3 verdicts.
First verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged in count 1 of the information, dated this date, July 26, 2023, signed by the foreperson. Second verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, guilty of mutilating a corpse as charged in count 2 of the information, dated this date, July 26, 2023, signed by the foreperson. The next verdict reads, we, the jury, find the defendant, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, guilty of third-degree sexual assault as charged in count 3 of the information, dated this date, 26th day of July, 2023, signed by the foreperson.
But jurors returned again on Thursday for day 4 of the trial and the second half of the case.
And I'm going to give you these instructions. The defendant has been found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, and third-degree sexual assault. We will now proceed with the second phase of this trial. During the second phase, you will be asked to determine whether the defendant is not responsible by reason of mental disease or defect. Before you may find the defendant is not responsible for the criminal conduct, the defendant must satisfy you to a reasonable certainty by the greater weight of the credible evidence that at the time the crime was committed, the defendant had a mental disease or defect and as a result lacked substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of the conduct or to conform that conduct to the requirements of the law.
For the defense's opening statement, Freilich echoed Judge Thomas Walsh's instructions.
The burden does shift to the defense in this particular case. We're in phase 2 now. and the burden shifts to the defense, to me, to ask you to consider whether the defendant, Taylor Denise Schabusiness, is responsible or is not responsible by reason of mental disease or defect. And Wisconsin law, under Wisconsin statutes 971.15, does require the defense to satisfy you jurors to a reasonable certainty by the greater weight of the credible evidence that at the time the crimes were committed, which was February 22nd of 2022, that Taylor Schabusiness had a mental disease or had a mental defect, and that as a result, she lacked the substantial capacity either to appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct or to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law. Taylor Schabusiness does qualify for the NGI plea based on her diagnosis of a serious mental disorder.
In the state's opening, Saunders argued Schabusiness should be held responsible for the crimes he says she knowingly committed.
Let's address the obvious. What Ms. Schabusiness did to Shad is disturbing. It's conduct we don't see often. It's conduct that you may hear about and think, my gosh, that person must not have been in their right mind when that happened. I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you otherwise. But you've already carefully listened to the evidence and followed the law that the judge gave you. And you'll do so going forward as well. Because you will be told what a mental disease or defect is and what it is not. A mental disease is not antisocial conduct. It's not conduct brought about by use of a controlled substance, a temporary mental state caused by a controlled substance. A person is not mentally ill just because they commit something that's unnatural, that's so enormous, that just is beyond comprehension, right? You'll be instructed that those are not mental diseases or defects. So as disturbing as the conduct you already heard about is, and may be, that's not where the analysis ends.
The defense began its case by calling Schabusiness's father, Arturo Coronado, who appeared in a jail jumpsuit. Coronado gave jurors a glimpse into Schabusiness's childhood.
Did something happen to Taylor's mother at some point?
She passed away.
Okay.
She passed away May 20th, 2009, in her sleep.
Okay. Did that take a toll on your daughter, Taylor?
Well, of course.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit,
toll
sir?
on my son as well and me.
Okay. Right. It took a toll on everybody, correct?
But yeah.
And when her mother passed away in May of 2009, how old was Taylor?
11, probably 11 and a half.
Okay.
My son and daughter were, about 9 and a half, 11 and a half years old.
Coronado described how the death of her mother affected Schabusiness.
Can you describe a little bit how the death of Taylor's mother took a toll on her or impacted her? Can you give me a little bit of commentary on that?
Well, they were pretty young. I mean, obviously, their mom's not around anymore, and Marla she was ill, so just I guess they kind of knew what was going on, but it was unexpected. We watched the movie the night before and fell asleep, and I woke up and my wife was already cold, already passed.
You found her?
She's laying next to me.
Okay. And what about the kids? What about Taylor? Did she see her mom in that state?
They did not see. No, I did not allow that.
Okay. But were the kids in the house?
They were upstairs in their bedrooms.
Okay. After that occurred, did you see any changes in Taylor's behavior, first of all?
She was a little rambunctious. Nothing. I mean, she played volleyball. She had a good amount of friends she hung out with. She was a normal kid.
Coronado said his family moved to the Green Bay area from Illinois in 2007. When Schabusiness began having issues at school, he sent her to live with her grandparents in Texas. Schabusiness's son now lives with those same grandparents.
Was there a point where she got pregnant?
Well, about a year and a half ago, maybe.
Okay. And
Yeah.
and she had a baby, correct?
Yes, she did.
And the baby is currently living in Texas with the grandparents, correct?
Yeah. How is that relevant to anything here? Why do we need to talk about him?
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. So, before the baby was born, was she placed at Nicolay Psychiatric Center?
Before the baby was born?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Testimony then switched to Schabusiness's mental health issues, her father admitting she suffered from hallucinations. He also touched on her drug use.
Like hallucinations?
She she was not in a right state of mind at all. So I feared that she would hurt herself. So that's why I took her. We both agreed. We both went there together and tried to get help. And then ended up releasing her, and she came home, and that was about it.
Okay. Was she prescribed some medications and things like that?
She was at that evening, no, but yeah, she has been on some medications that she never liked taking those pills. I mean, they kind of messed her up even worse.
Did they cause her to hallucinate or cause her to have
I think it
problems?
all started with a Seroquel that was taken, back. I don't understand too much about those prescription drugs, but they never agreed with her at all.
Okay.
And
She was doing really well there too until her boyfriend/husband got out of jail. That turned everything upside down.
okay. In part because of the methamphetamine use, right?
Yep.
So Taylor was doing pretty well, and then she started using the drugs.
Yep.
No further questions.
Pretty bad drug too.
Anything on that, Mr. Freilich?
What was the drug?
No, meth, heroin, whatever else. I don't know.
Marijuana?
Yeah, I don't know. The kid was already doing that before, and just a fucking loser, and he got my daughter involved in it.
As Coronado was escorted out of the courtroom, our cameras caught an exchange between he and his daughter. They can be heard saying, "I love you," and "Go Bears."
I love you too. Go Bears.
The defense then called forensic psychologist Diane Litton to the stand. She described looking over a voluminous amount of discovery material in the case.
She was diagnosed with a mood disorder with prior history of psychosis. She had a history of diagnosis of mood disorder, suicidal, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, history of hypomania, and marijuana use daily. She was prescribed medications to treat some medications, lithobid. They're to manage bipolar disorder. She was prescribed Abilify, which is an antipsychotic medication, and they stopped the Seroquel that she had been on since the age of 14.
Litton told jurors Schabusiness is not responsible for the crimes she's convicted of.
About what is your opinion as it relates to your evaluation and assessment of Taylor Schabusiness?
My opinion is that she qualifies for the not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. My opinions are that she was not responsible because of a mental disease. She wasn't responsible for the criminal conduct because at the time of the event, she had the mental disease, and it both affected, she lacked substantial capacity to both appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct at the time the homicide occurred, but also she could not she couldn't conform. she lacked volitional control. She couldn't conform her conduct to the requirements of law. She was lacking in her ability to control herself. The volitional control both was lacking. That's my opinion.
You said that she lacked the ability to control herself?
Yes, at the time of the event.
And do you opine that she has a mental disease or a mental defect or both?
Yes.
Both?
It's unclear. I tried to get her to be evaluated. I suggested she be evaluated, as Dr. Luchetta did too, further for possible defect, mental defect, brain issues. That didn't happen. But my impression was that she has a mental disease, which is the most likely bipolar disorder.
She then described Schabusiness's bizarre behavior shown throughout the trial.
Facial expressions, can you give some commentary on that from what you've seen?
Very unusual. She's been described as smirky. Smirky. She has inappropriate, grinning, weird grinning when she's talking about the crimes. People have interpreted it to be like laughing at what she did. At times, in the jail, with evaluators, with me, at times, briefly, it's very strange. Other times looking, I can mimic it, very scowly. A lot of people interpret it superficially to be grinning. Grinning it all, but getting a kick out of everything. Not me. Based on my experience and training, that's a psychotic person right there. That's what's causing this really weird, bizarre. And I'm telling you, to me, it's off the scale. 32 years. I've seen a lot of psychotic people, bipolar, psychotic, manic, and I just haven't seen very many like this. That is very exceptional.
After Litton's testimony was complete, the defense declined to call any other witnesses. Schabusiness again waived her right to testify. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.